So in this lesson, we're going to talk about the essential gear that you need for home butchering. And I think it's important that we talk about this before you actually get a deer on the deck, before you bring it home, so you're not stressing out and worrying about what you need to buy. We'll talk about the must-haves as well as the nice-to-haves. I've got Brett with me here from Carnivore Collective, qualified butcher, all-around great guy, business owner, entrepreneur, legend.
Thanks, mate.
So let's get started. You walk me through what are the must-haves.
Yep.
If we're on a budget, if we're being, like me, really, really tight.
Funds are tight. Yeah. Yep. All right.
What's the essentials?
So I suppose it's probably easiest to start with how I've set myself up. An apron, no-brainer. You have a look at how I'm set up here with a knife pouch and a knife belt. If you don't have everything laying at your fingertips, it's going to be safer and easier for you to basically have them strapped to yourself. Again, maybe not essential, but it is definitely a good option. So within my knife pouch here, the one must-have in a knife for myself as a trade butcher is what we call a 6-inch curved boning knife. So nice narrow blade, you can get in and cut between bone and tendon, as opposed to a skinning knife when you're field dressing, thicker and much harder to do that.
Having been someone who was stubborn and didn't use a boning knife for years, once you move to it, you'll realize how much better it is. And honestly, it's not an expensive piece of kit.
And that's what I was going to touch on. For myself, who sold knives for a long time, it's much easier to sell a $25 to $30 boning knife than it is a $200 buck or something of that nature that effectively, as we all know, you might leave out the bush. And it's going to hurt the hip pocket. So this does just as good a job, if not better, than your typical hunting knife.
Is that the only thing that you essentially need?
We would always suggest you have a handsaw for breaking down the animal into smaller primals, more manageable pieces, essentially. The last thing you want to be doing is having a whole animal and lugging it around, particularly when guys don't have rails to work from, that we do in this case. You're going to be bench boning, as we call it. So again, a handsaw probably is in the bracket of $50 to $100, so not overly expensive.
And the size, I think, is also worth mentioning that it is a large saw with a big handle, so you can get like a decent amount of surface on it. You can obviously purchase smaller handheld ones that are really designed for field dressing. I don't think that's appropriate in the home situation, trying to take a tool like that that's really designed for like just getting out of trouble. When you're butchering at home, you want it to be easy. That's the whole idea, that you can be quick, you can be efficient, you don't want to be mucking around. If you've got this tiny little blade and you're sawing away, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your energy. Something like that is important.
That's a perfect bridge to what we always talk about, is at the end of the day, the size relevance is just literal the animal that you're cutting up. So if your animal width is obviously smaller than that, then that saw is going to be completely fine. But it's also the same for the knives. You don't want to be, in some cases, if you've got a big primal of meat or a big cut of meat, you don't potentially want to be using a little boning knife to try and cut and almost hack it and saw it. So that's where something like this, which does look big and scary, but it is just basically a bigger slicing knife. So again, the circumference of the meat is relevant to obviously the length of the blade.
Yeah, it looks cool.
Yeah, and it looks cool.
Not just big.
It does make you feel good. Another important thing to mention with people, which a lot of people forget, is you do need to keep your knife sharp. It's the old adage of a blunt knife is a much more dangerous knife. So obviously to do that, some form of sharpening steel. So essentially this is for honing and keeping sharp. You will require a sharpening stone or something of that nature when your knife does go blunt to re-establish the edge. It's just simple things like sanitizers, making sure everything's at your fingertips, making sure your cutting area and surface is nice and clean and prepared. Tubs, buckets, again, just to make the process easier when you're working in a small confined space.
Yeah, and in terms of benches, while we're talking about surfaces, it is important that you have a bench that's fit for purpose. So while I would recommend something like a stainless steel bench is fantastic, you can get it all bloody, you can get it messy, then you can quickly clean it and easily clean it and get it back to being safe and sanitary.
As long as you've obviously got a good cutting board on top. Because it pains me every time I see someone cutting on a glass surface or a marble or a stainless. So as long as you've got some sort of cutting board on top.
And they're pretty cheap as well. Getting a stainless steel bench nowadays is so much easier than it was previously.
That's your, again, essentials, is literally a knife, somewhere to work and cut, something to keep your knife sharp, a couple of other little bits and pieces. Other than that, when you start falling into your nice to haves or non-essentials, you start talking about things like butcher's twine, book of some description again, just to help in the process of hanging up. Same with your gambrels, which come in multiple sizes and variations.
And should we explain what a gambrel is?
Yeah, so essentially this is to spread the legs and be able to hang it, and then you will have either a rail hook, again if you've got a rail, or some sort of hook potentially hanging it up in some form, so your animal will hang off here. All right.
Yeah, and essentially it opens the animal up and gives you access to all the nooks and crannies that you need, so that when you are cutting it up, you're not fighting against the animal. It's there, it's in this configuration that you need, that you can just move through it. A gambrel is also a lighter one, not so much, this is quite a heavy duty one, although you do want a heavy duty one for home because that will last you. But you can actually take these out into the field as well, and you can use something like a rope to, once you've got a deer down or a pig or a goat, whatever you want, you can then quickly pull out your gambrel, go through the Achilles, put the animal on, and then like get it up into the tree, so you're not working with it on the ground. It's fine to work with an animal on the ground, but it's much easier to work it once it's hoisted up, and that's how a gambrel is your best friend. And can I say, what's the difference between this gambrel and this gambrel?
So this one here actually swivels. So just again, when you've got it up here and you want to move it around a bit, it's just a little bit easier to work with.
Yeah.
In that form.
Also, a little thing about this is like the gambrel masterclass.
It is. Module.
You'll learn this with gambrels. The dip here is really, really important. Obviously, that's where your leg sits, and it sits in this little divot, which helps it not slide. If this is not deep enough, it will fall. Your animal will fall off. Once your animal falls off, it's a pain in the butt. So something like this that has really deep divots here is really good, because once the animal's on there, the weight of the animal will pull it down. It's not going to come off. Yep. So something like that's great. You can use these. I've used these at home as a get edge or free card when you quickly need to. But again, buy quality ones, because if it's a large animal, and use them to size, because if it's a large animal, it will bend smaller ones.
Stockinette, so just a good carcass wrap to keep it clean and tidy potentially.
Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean?
So what I mean by that
when are you going to use it?
So in stockinette form, so you can literally cut some of this and actually use like a meat
game bag
essentially.
Yep.
So it's breathable, it's washable, but in the context of if you've scun your animal and you want to hang it for a period of time, because it might be an older animal, which means the meat might be a little less tender. So you know you need to hang it for a period of time. It will obviously, if being scun, you don't want to have it in there with the skin on for days on end, which then becomes a really hard process to get that skin off, and it obviously becomes messy. So the trade-off is obviously you might dry the meat out a little bit. So potentially if you have some of this stockinette on it, it's still going to be breathable, but it's not going to dry it out as much.
As quickly. Okay.
Yeah.
And you've got different sizes here?
Yeah, so this one's actually more a cleaning cheesecloth style of stockinette.
But I actually wasn't sure whether to show this, and I think it's actually 100% worth showing, is having a book or a diary or a journal or something that you can record your recipes in. I also have one that I use for hunting whenever I go out hunting, recording my actual hunts, including the kills, the GPS, all that kind of thing.
So it's a mate of mine who we shoot a bit of content with, Brett Baker from Eat, Live, Hunt. So he's a really big family man, very much same ethos and thought process that we sort of all abide by. So he just thought, again, as something we're losing touch with handing recipes on, and essentially he wanted a book that we could diarise and hand down to our kids primarily. But again, for those guys that enjoy a beer of a wine after a long, hard day, at least you have everything written down. So if it's the best thing you've ever made, you can replicate it. Or if it's the worst thing you've ever made, you can tweak it. Yeah.
And having it in physical form, I know we think that phones and tablets and stuff are easier and that you don't lose that data. The reality is you buy a new phone, you buy a new tablet, you've lost that data. This, you write it down, it's there, it's not going anywhere. You're not going to update your recipe book unless you fill it. And that's a great thing.